right. We have about 40 or 60 people who registered for this event. So I think we have close to 20 in already. So I think I'll just go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Cristina Stanchu, and I'm the Director of the Humanities Research Center at VCU, and I'm glad you're here to help us kick off our first event in the series, HRC Research Fridays. Which is new this year, and I'm very excited about it. It's a series dedicated to supporting faculty, ongoing research, mentoring, grant writing, and others. And I'm very grateful to Josh and Heather for helping us kickstart this series. The remaining 3 events every other Friday will be on September the 24th. We'll have the previous cohort of HRC residential fellows present their research. Then in October, we'll have a workshop on mentoring underrepresented minority faculty with Dr. Archana Pathak. And we'll end the series this semester with a presentation on a recent community project, Richmond Racial Equity by Ebony Walden and Dr. Megan Goff in the Wilder School. So please join us for these events, as well as our signature speaker series and Meet VCU Author series, which actually debuts on Monday as well, Monday the 13th, with history professor Ryan Smith, who will talk about his recent book, Death and Rebirth in a Southern City, Richmond's Historic Cemeteries. Today's event is about grants in the humanities, and it is co-presented by the College of Humanities and Sciences Office of Sponsored Programs and the VCU Office of the Vice President for Research and Innovation. I'm delighted to introduce our speakers to you, and we look forward to your questions and a discussion at the end of their presentation. So our first panelist, I understand they will go back and forth, is Josh Hahn, who is a Senior Grant Development Specialist in the Office of the Vice President for Research and Innovation. Before joining VCU last year, I think in the summer of last year, Josh worked with nonprofits, including Breakthrough Greater Boston, an educational nonprofit where he raised over $4 million in institutional funding. He has a Master's of Music from Rice University and a Bachelor's of Arts in Music from Tufts, with a minor in mathematics. Josh's grant development and writing expertise allows him to serve both campuses on federal, state, and foundation opportunities. Drawing on his experience in the areas of education, the humanities, and the arts, Josh has a strong foundation for fostering cross-campus, multidisciplinary collaborations among VCU researchers. And what I found particularly exciting is that Josh is also a published music scholar. Our second Yeah, that's great. Our second speaker today is Heather Lennon, who is the Director of Sponsored Programs in the College of Humanities and Sciences at VCU. Heather began working at VCU in 2013 in the Central Office of Sponsored Programs. And since then, she has also worked in the College of Engineering. As a director of the Sponsored Programs team in the college, she assists with grant proposals, post-award management, and everything in between. Her bachelor's at Randolph-Macon College and her master's degree in history at Virginia Tech. Many thanks to both of you for agreeing to be part of this panel, and I'll turn it over to you now.
All right, thanks for the warm introduction, Christina. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So we're very excited to talk with you about grants today, and very excited to see so much interest from the humanities faculty in pursuing grants. So today we have a little bit of a taste of everything about grant writing at VCU, and we're going to point you in the direction of where to find more information. Yep. So today's agenda is I'm first going to talk a little bit about how to find grant opportunities for your research and for your scholarship. And then we'll talk about grant budgets. Heather will lead that discussion. And then I'll cover very briefly some tips for effective grant writing, for the actual writing of proposals. And then we'll talk about how to find resources and support around campus for your grant writing. And then we'll talk about how to how to plan out your grant writing process so you have enough time to submit. And then at the end, we'll talk about what to do if your grant is declined and you need to resubmit, which happens fairly frequently. And we'll have a question and answer at the end. So we have some chats coming in. All right. So first, we'll start with how to find grant opportunities. So I'm going to start with just going through some of the most popular grant opportunities. So the National Endowment for the Humanities Summer Fellowships are a very popular mechanism for individual scholars to get a grant to support you during the summer. And this is something that we call a limited submission, which means that BCU can only submit 2 per year. And so the way that that actually works is the Humanities Research Center, Christina's group, will announce when those are due internally, and then there will be a selection process to decide which faculty are going to be submitting to NEH. And so the actual deadline to NEH is in September, but I'm told that you can expect the internal process to be announced at the end of the spring semester. So stay tuned for that. It's $6,000 over the 2 months of the summer, and it supports basically your scholarly work and producing scholarly products. There's also a more substantial NEH fellowship, which is not a limited submission. And this is, you get to choose how many months you're going to be on the fellowship, but it pays $5,000 per month. And it's, again, time to develop your scholarly ideas and create manuscripts and that sort of thing. And this is full-time, so you kind of have to step away from your other projects. And then another one I wanted to highlight is called the NEH Digital Humanities. And this is very exciting because it invites multidisciplinary proposals. So this is to work with computationally intensive proposals, things that work with large amounts of data in the humanities to draw insights. And they range from 50,000 to 325,000, depending on what part of the process you're in. So for the 50,000, the starting grant is sort of to plan and get going, but then you can apply for subsequent grants. Another agency is called Virginia Humanities. This is one of the state level centers for the humanities. There's one in every state. And so here in Virginia, they have grant cycles twice per year, and it's typically between $5,000 and $10,000. And for the Virginia Humanities, you must have a public presentation component. So it's not just for your research, but also present in a public setting. So that's a very important component of that one. And also they're interested in Virginia in particular. So there's also a number of grants to visit libraries and repositories of humanities materials. So look out for areas that you might need to travel to do your research, and you can often find a grant to visit and do your scholarship there. So next I want to talk about a database that we have at BCU for looking for grant opportunities called Pivot. And this database is managed and is shared by many universities. It's run by ProQuest right now, and they're continuously being updated, and there are federal grants, state grants, and local grants as well. So the way you access Pivot is by signing up using your BCU email. So it shows 2 options to sign up, and you have to use the option to sign up with your email. It's what we have configured right now. You can also, a really neat feature is that you can set a search and then set it and forget it, and it will email you every time that a new grant is included in that search. So that's kind of a nice feature, kind of keeps reminding you to look at opportunities. So next, I'm going to hand it off to Heather to talk about grant budgets.
All right, thank you, Josh. So now we're going to talk about the grant budgets. I do want to give a brief disclaimer. I have a little bit of the sniffles right now, so just bear with me as I get through that. But basically, there are two components of a budget, and a lot of you may already be aware of this, but first component is the itemized budget, what your actual hard dollar costs are going to be. And then the second part is your budget narrative or your budget justification. And so what the sponsor really wants to see is that first detailed itemized cost, what's going to be in your personnel line items, what's going to be in your supplies, your travel, et cetera. And in the budget justification and in the narrative, what they really want to see is, okay, how are those costs calculated and why are they important? They want to see some type of justification of, if you, for instance, want to put a month of your summer effort on the project, what responsibilities will you have on the project for that 1 month? If you have a graduate student, what will that student be doing? Why do you need travel costs? Is it to travel to a conference or to meet a collaborator? The budget justification or the narrative really kind of helps show the sponsor, at least a component of the story of your project. Next slide. So I don't want to scare anyone with, uniform guidance and federal regulations, but this is just something to be aware of. You in no way, shape, or form need to memorize 2 CFR 200 subpart E. But our office, the sponsor programs office, both within CHS as well as the central office of sponsor programs, is very familiar with federal uniform guidance. And this is basically what the Federal Office of Management and Budget has put together of what they see as really literally guidance for universities as well as other institutions and guiding them in cost principles on sponsor projects. And what this is really looking at are our project costs allowable, allocable, and reasonable. So allowable, does the sponsor allow the cost? So for instance, sometimes, especially with foundation sponsors, we may see that tuition isn't allowable. So as we're putting your budget together, that's something that we would look out for. If tuition wasn't allowable, we'd make sure it wasn't included in the budget and then figure out how to factor that in, perhaps internally if you had a graduate student. Allocable is basically making sure that that specific cost can be allocated to the project. So if you're buying a batch of pens, for instance, that's applicable to the project, are all of those pens going to be specifically used for the project? And reasonable. If a prudent person came in and took a look at the cost, would they think that that was reasonable? Like if you had a $10,000 laptop, for instance, that's a little high for a laptop, and maybe this is a really special laptop for your project. And so in that case, it could be reasonable. But again, this is just for your information as you're working with our office and we're helping you to put your budget together. Also, if you're awarded projects, as we're looking at expenses that are hitting your grants, these are the things that we're looking at in terms of, if we can say this expense is okay to be budgeted or to hit the index. Next slide. So briefly too, and I have another slide right after this one going over a little bit more in directs and indirect costs, but just when we're talking about budgets, a lot of times you'll hear, okay, what do you specifically want to budget on the project? And this is your direct cost. These are your supplies, your personnel, et cetera, what's specifically budgeted. Your F&A costs, this is F&A, indirect cost, overhead costs. You'll see all three mean the same thing. And these are basically costs that are, they can't be specifically identified. They're not one specific thing. They're kind of like multiple things, including, I like to use a lot of times like the lights in the building. It's basically VCU's costs for conducting the project. So you need lights in order to be able to see what's going on in your lab, what's going on in your office to conduct the project. You need internet, et cetera. These are kind of like your bulk indirect costs. Next slide. So again, just a few examples of indirect costs, your salary and wages, fringe benefits, travel, tuition, supplies, anything we are specifically budgeting on the project are direct costs. And then your indirect costs are things that are included in that F&A rate that we'll include on your budget. This may include office space, general office supplies, salary and wages for administrative personnel. VCU does have an F&A rate agreement that's federally negotiated by the Department of Health and Human Resources. So that's really how we decide what your indirect cost will be on the project. And there are different rates. So for instance, if you have a general on-campus research project, that's 55.25 is your indirect cost rate. If you're doing something off campus, that's a 26% rate. If you're doing something like instruction, I think that's 47%. Or maybe there's a catch-all one that's other sponsored programs. And maybe you're doing something like a course development or something like that, or some type of conference that may fall under that 38% rate for other sponsored projects. It's also possible that a sponsor, particularly we see this for foundations, may limit your F&A rate that we can charge on the project. And if that's so, we'll always adhere to whatever the sponsor published F&A rate limitation is. Next slide. So a few things to consider as you're putting your budget together. And our office, if you ever need assistance putting your budget together, we are more than happy to assist with that, whether you've put a draft together in an Excel sheet, or if you just want to send us a few statements of, I want, X, Y, and Z in our budget, we'll come up with a draft template for you, send it, and we can go back and forth to kind of finalize that budget. But some general things to consider as you're putting your budget together. What do you need for the project? So salary and wages. You, as the principal investigator and any, honestly, senior or key personnel on the project, have to have at least 1% effort on that project. You need to be committing effort on the project. So it could be the minimum 1%, it could be 33% for summer. It just depends on what work you're going to be committing to the project. Another thing to consider is whether you want that effort to be summer or academic effort, depending on when you're going to be completing the bulk of the work for the project. There are different fringe rates associated with both. Summer effort has a fringe rate of 8.3. Academic is, I think, 40.3. And also sometimes we see faculty members who, if they know they're going to be committing a decent amount of effort during the academic period, you may need a course release. We always advise, if you are thinking about a course release in order to conduct a project, to talk with your chair up front, to let them know, I'm working on this proposal. In order to conduct the project, I feel like I'll need a course release, and really have that conversation up front. So that way, in the case if the project is awarded, that conversation kind of isn't coming out of nowhere. But our office can help you with determining what the appropriate level of effort is for you based off of your course load for a course release. Other things to consider are graduate students. We have undergraduates, postdocs, maybe you'll have hourly folks working on the project. If you do have graduate students, our office always budgets, so long as it's allowable, tuition along with the stipend for graduates. And one thing to remember is that tuition is proportional to the stipend. So for instance, if you have a graduate student you want to put on the project at 50% effort, the tuition will also be 50%. The tuition will match whatever the stipend level is. You could also have domestic or international travel, supplies, equipment is anything $5,000 and over, tuition, publications, really anything you feel like that you'll need in order to complete the project, we should be, and is within the sponsor guidelines, should be included in that budget. But our office can definitely help you put that together. And I think that wraps up my budget discussion.
All right, thanks, Heather. So now we're going to talk a little bit about writing the proposal. So to give you a little bit of a sense of what goes into a proposal, here's a list of some common components. At the beginning, you might have a project summary, which is something that the reviewer looks at first to get a feel for the whole proposal. And we often advise polishing that, spending a lot of attention on that, because that's sort of like your first impression. And then we also have the narrative or the project description, which is usually the longest section, and it will thoroughly describe the project. So this typically starts with describing the need or the problem or the gap in knowledge that your research will fill. And this almost reads like a review of literature, like you're kind of going through and giving an assessment of where the field is right now in your area and kind of where it needs to be filled in. And then you'll probably conclude with the goal of your project for how to fill that gap in knowledge. You can think of it, you could also think of this as your hypothesis for what you hope to find in your research when you conduct it. And after that, you'll probably be asked to talk about your research questions or your goals or your objectives for your research. And then there's a detailed strategy for completing the research. You'll also discuss your methodology. You'll discuss if this is a grant where there's deliverables, then you might discuss outcomes and outputs, which is kind of a fancy way of saying what you're going to do and what effect what you're doing is going to have. And then grants almost always have a section where you describe how you're going to evaluate your success and how will you know if you met your goal. There's going to be a budget, as Heather discussed. There's usually going to be a section about you and your qualifications for completing it. You have to disclose all of your previous funding and your current funding, and oftentimes what else you're applying for. Usually there's a document about what resources, space, and facilities will be involved. Partnership and commitment letters of support are very important to show that the grant is feasible. And then there might be an array of other documents that are supplemental and will help you show how various parts of the project will be managed. So when you're writing a grant, it's really important to put yourself in the reviewer's shoes. So they're often reading many, many grants at the same time. So think about exactly what they need to know and in what order in order to really understand your point. So imagine you're explaining it to somebody in a conversation, kind of. You want to make it as easy as possible for them to digest. So it's not a huge cognitive burden to unpack what you're saying. So work from general and more widely understood things towards your specific topic. Be sure to really frame the gap of knowledge that you're going to fill. Make that very clear and very compelling. And we recommend trying different formats like bolding or underlining parts of it to help direct people's attention to different things, help give them kind of signposts. So this is not, you don't have to conform to just a block of text or like you're submitting a manuscript. This is really a document to make it as easy as possible for them to understand it. So, and we also really recommend sign up to be a reviewer. So NEH is constantly looking for reviewers, and the easiest way to figure out what it's like to be on the other side is to become a reviewer. So we really recommend that. Oftentimes I talk to investigators, once they've been a reviewer, they have so many new ideas for their grants. It really helps. It's very important to read the solicitation very carefully. So make sure you read it's easy to gloss over different parts of it, but you really do have to absorb all of it. We recommend writing short sentences, so don't concatenate several sentences together, and vary your sentence length so it doesn't get too burdensome to read. And just try to be as clear and concise as possible. So other tips we recommend are to try to avoid disciplinary jargon when possible, and to introduce those terms very carefully. Write in a persuasive rhetoric, because remember, you're convincing them that what you're doing is important, and that your approach is the best approach for doing this research. Include graphics as possible. And when you're preparing your manuscript, when you're preparing your grant, get feedback from your mentors, other experts, and even lay people outside of your discipline, so that if they can understand it, then it will be well understood by the reviewers. And then I don't have to tell you this, but edit and proofread many times, because it really helps to keep people engaged with your grant. There aren't errors. And submit early, because there oftentimes are little glitches you kind of have to overcome, especially for foundation grants where they have sort of homemade systems. So we really recommend to submit early. So the most common reasons that, in our experience, that proposals are not funded is if the reviewer thinks the project wouldn't significantly advance the field, so the significance of the research hasn't been argued successfully. If you are not citing enough of the relevant literature, so the reviewer is saying, why didn't you cite all these other folks? And it doesn't seem like you really exactly know where you are situated to them. If you don't have enough experience in the essential methodology of the research, if it isn't clear what your sources will be when you're going about the research, or if it's unrealistic, if it appears that you're trying to really transform the field in one grant and they're not really sure how that's going to happen in the shorter period of time. And then finally, not following directions. So it's really important that if there are directions about what font to use, what margins to use, that all of those are adhered to. All right, so next, we're going to talk a little bit about what resources there are around campus to help you write your grants. So at the Office of the Vice President of Research and Innovation, where I work, our office, we're the Office of Research Development, and we try to help you. We can help you with searching for collaborators, particularly outside of your field, if you're looking for a multidisciplinary collaborator. We work with several researchers, so we might know someone, or we also have a database of researchers that we can search by keyword. We can help you search for opportunities. If you're having trouble with Pivot or other databases, we can help you narrow down that search. So our colleagues in Innovation Gateway can help you to think about IP. If there's intellectual property and you're not really sure if it should be disclosed or patented or how that would work, they can help you with that. We can help you, particularly for complex grants, to plan out your timeline for applying. And we can also provide you with templates and checklists. So continuing on from there, we can review your proposal. So you would just send it to us, and we check it over if it's clear to somebody like us who's outside of the discipline, and if it fits the agency's requirements. And that also gives you an extra set of eyes for any typos. We can also provide you with boilerplate language about VCU and about the facilities here. And we can provide successful proposal examples. And NEH is really great about this. Actually, any program you apply to has several successful examples. So that's really great. And we can also try to find disciplinary reviewers for you if you haven't found colleagues who will read it. So some of the VCU libraries also has some helpful resources. Each discipline has a devoted research librarian, and they can assist you with finding relevant literature. If there's an area of the literature that you're just having trouble finding all of the sources, they can help you build that out. They're also really great at helping you create a dissemination plan. And this is an important component of NEH grants. They want to know how the research that they funded will get out into the world and be of importance to the public. But they have experts on that subject. They can also help you with a data management plan if your research is going to create a lot of data and you're not sure exactly how to articulate that data management plan to fit their requirements. And there's an open educational resource librarian who can help you make open educational resources, which is a great thing for grants as well. And they also have their own boilerplate language. All right, so the contact information for some of these resources is on this slide, and we'll try to get these slides to everyone who registered as well. There's my contact information. My colleague, Melissa Throckmorton, will also assist with grant writing. The research librarian for the humanities is John Glover. Our research data librarian, Nina Exner, can help with data management plans. And we also have an open educational resource librarian, Jessica Kirshner. All right, so I'm going to pass it off to Heather.
All right. And I also, in your slides, Josh, I really like that you pointed out you should submit early because that ties into the timeline. So I think next slide. There we go. So timeline is really important. And this slide here is kind of like a general guideline that we give investigators and faculty for our timeline. So we ask that at least 3 weeks or 15 business days, you let us know that you're working on a proposal. Of course, the sooner, the better, but this kind of gives us the lead time that we need. I will say that if you do have other components of your proposal, for example, if you have a subaward, like you have a collaborator at University of Virginia that you also want to include on the project, go ahead and just add 2 more weeks to that timeline, because we essentially also have to work with UVA to get a mini proposal package from them to incorporate in our proposal. So anytime you have an external collaborator, just add a little bit more time for that buffer. Then about 10 business days before the deadline, we would like to see the final budget justification, and draft documents. These do not need to be in final form, just a majority of the draft documents, your science, your biosketch, current pendings, etc. And this allows our office to really take a look over everything. And we're not getting into, doing a line by line review of the narrative. What we're really looking for is just making sure that it's in compliance with what the sponsor guidelines are, as well as, VCU, federal guidance, et cetera. And then 5 days before the business deadline. So our office is going to work on reviewing your documents, making sure the budget's final, working through any kinks with that. Then we're going to send it over to the Central Office of Sponsor Programs, and they're actually going to be the ones responsible the majority of the time for actually submitting the proposal. And so we ask that we route the proposal through RAMSPOT, and I'll have a few more slides about RAMSPOT a little bit later, at least 5 business days before the deadline. And then finally, 3 business days before the deadline, we recommend that final versions of the proposal documents be submitted. We understand that life happens and sometimes that 3 days doesn't always happen. I do recommend, if you're going to stretch it out, having your final documents being ready to submit at least the day before or at the very latest the morning of the proposal deadline, because as Josh pointed out, glitches happen. A lot of the things that we're submitting go through sponsor portal systems, and especially on heavy deadline days, the central OSP is working on several different proposals all at one time. And those submission systems kind of get overrun. So it's really important to kind of like factor in that technology time that could cause you issues. Next slide. So the first step too, in letting our office know that you're going to be working on a proposal is submitting the CHS Sponsor Programs Proposal Processing Form. This is a Google form. A lot of times when faculty members reach out and say, hey, I'm working on a proposal, we'll immediately send you the form to fill out. And this form is really used for our office to get a better understanding of what's going on with the project. What's your project period? Who's involved? Are there subawards? Are you working with faculty members on maybe the School of Medicine, Wilder School, etc.? Are you doing foreign travel? It kind of allows us to do really a quick triage of the proposal. And we may have more additional questions based off of the proposal form, additional questions based off of that we need to kind of work through with you. But our team will provide assistance with, the program announcement review, making sure that you're in compliance with everything that the program announcement says, as well as anything that the sponsor has for general funding guidelines. We'll also assist with the budget justification, and really the compliance review of all of the documents, your science, as well as any ancillary documents like your current pending, your biosketch, etc. Next slide. So this is kind of just the general workflow of how the proposal will go. So as Josh talked about, you'll find an opportunity, generate an idea, and say, okay, this is what I want to go for. And you'll notify our office that you're submitting this proposal. You'll also have any discussions that you need to have with your chair. For instance, like we talked about earlier, if you want a course release, you'll have already had those conversations ahead of time. Then you'll let our office know. And from there, we'll create the RAMSPOT record, which is basically the proposal record for the Central Office of Sponsor Programs. We'll work on your budget, review your documents for compliance, work out any glitches, etc. And then we'll send the proposal once we have the final budget and drafts to the Central Office of Sponsor Programs. And the Central Office of Sponsor Programs is really looking at, okay, do all the budget forms match? Does the budget justification match up to the budget? Are we in compliance with everything that the sponsor needs us to be in compliance with, as well as any VCU regulations that we need to be aware of? They're doing that ultimate final review, approval, check, and a lot of times the final submission of the project, literally hitting the button to submit the project or the proposal to the sponsor. And just an FYI, many of you may already be aware, but within this Central Office of Sponsor Programs, there's a few different teams. And so for CHS, we will always be with the goal team. They primarily handle federal and nonprofit funding. There's also a blue team, a green team as well. There's a gray team. We may at times work with the red team, that's for industry and clinical trial sponsors as well. Next slide. So I've mentioned it a few times, RAMSPOT. You've probably heard of RAMSPOT if you've submitted a proposal, or maybe heard your friends talk about RAMSPOT. But RAMSPOT is basically Central OSP's records management system for both proposal and awards. So all proposals are going through RAMSPOT. If you receive an award, those awards are also going through RAMSPOT. So any sponsor project, this includes if you are a subaward, say your collaborator at UVA wants you to be a subaward on their project, that needs to go through RAMSPOT. If it's a proposal that, and these do happen, you can submit yourself either through a sponsor system, or maybe you just need to email the sponsor your proposal. Those still need to go through RAMSPOT, and those still need to be reviewed by our office as well as the Central Office of Sponsor Programs. There are also proposals that there may not be a signature that's required by the Director of Sponsor Programs. And those proposals also need to go through RAMSPOT. So all proposals need to go through RAMSPOT. When in doubt, check with our office and we will let you know if there's some type of an exception. Generally, there's not, but we will definitely let you know. Next slide. So within RAMSPOT, if you've worked in the system before, you are aware that there are multiple RAMSPOT notifications. So you will be advised through each step of the proposal process, when the proposal's been delivered to OSP, when the reviewer has picked it up, if there's any type of questions during that reviewer's review of your proposal. And just know that when you receive those notifications, our office is also copied on those notifications as well. So you're not receiving them by yourself. And we can a lot of times step in and help address questions that OSP has. Oftentimes, I recommend that if a reviewer asks a question or makes a comment, sometimes it's easier to let our office respond first, just to kind of, since we speak their language, more or less, we can help you navigate that. Also in RAMSPOT, like I said, this is where awards will be tracked and entered as well. You'll also submit, just-in-time notifications here, but it's really kind of a catch-all for all proposals and awards. And I think that's all I have to say about that.
All right, thanks, Heather.
Sure.
So next, I'm going to talk about what might happen after you submit your proposal. So, so the reality of submitting grants is that between 1 and 6 and 1 and 8 are when 1 and 8 proposals are funded. So, and also that after you've submitted your proposal on resubmission, it is more likely to be funded. So the increased chances each time you resubmit. So resubmitting is going to be a big part of your experience of writing grants. And so that's where we're going to devote a short portion to that as well. So once you receive your comments from the reviewers, most of these grants are peer reviewed, so you'll get some detailed comments. Look for things that would discourage you from applying for the same project, the same mechanism. So if the project is ineligible, that would be an indication not to reapply with this particular project and this mechanism. If the reviewers don't understand the significance of the particular gap in knowledge you're trying to fill, that can be a pretty difficult issue to overcome. It might indicate that maybe you should try a different grant mechanism or agency. But you should use your judgment on that one, because it's possible also that they just didn't understand part of what you were writing. But that's something to look for. If they think that the work has been completed by someone else, then that's an indication to try to figure out how to situate what you're doing relative to the other researchers. If they think that it's not resources or perhaps it's too ambitious, that can be an indication that the project needs to be significantly changed. Or if they think that the methodology, the way you're going about it, is not suitable for the topic, that can also be mean you might have to significantly rework the project.
Josh, I think we're losing you a little bit. Your connection is a little unstable. I'm sorry. It happens. Thank you so much for your patience, everyone. It's still not working, so we might we might just take a break. I'm not sure, Heather.
We just had, I think, a couple more slides. Josh was going to go over the flaws and then preparing for. Oh, is he back?
We see you.
Okay.
I think maybe if you don't open the images, we might be more successful in actually hearing your thoughts.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so all right, it looks like I'm back. Sorry about that. Just internet's cutting in and out here. So determine what can be fixed easily and what needs time to kind of manage your time, and figure out what strengths in your proposal need to be retained and emphasize more. It's really important to talk to your program officer for feedback. And oftentimes the program officers are hired to kind of be on your side. So you don't need to be scared of them. They're trying to help you make the most successful proposal you can. And discuss your reviews and the program officer feedback with a trusted colleague. So things to just check through to make sure that these aren't interfering with your proposal's success would be make sure you're following all of the instructions, make sure the knowledge gap is very clear, like what your research will fill. So in your grant somewhere, sort of head off certain reviewer questions by including potential challenges or pitfalls and how you will address those. And then a couple of ways to strengthen your position would be to publish more articles in your topic area, establish credibility. You can also add a senior collaborator if it's a collaborative grant. You can also make sure that the budget and duration is appropriate for the project, and make sure there aren't budget line items that aren't somewhere referenced in your proposal. So that concludes our presentation, and we're very excited to hear your questions.
Great, thank you so much. This is great. I always learn something new, so I have a few questions of my own, but I would like to invite all the attendees to raise their hands if they would like to ask a question live or to post them in the Q&A box. We've had a couple of questions that I fielded as you were talking, and I just like to say thank you to Josh and Heather for agreeing to share these slides with the participants. We'll get them from you and we'll be sure to email them to you. So let's see if we have any questions coming in. Or while that happens, could you talk a little bit about the differences between working with applicants in the humanities and in other fields, or if there are any particular challenges for grant writing in the humanities as opposed to other disciplines?
Sure, maybe I'll take that one first. So I think there are a few challenges that I can think of. One would be sometimes the number of grant opportunities can seem more limited, or it can feel like you're having to fit your project into more of a STEM kind of funder because there are more of those. So that's definitely a concern. But the flip side is that oftentimes there are fewer expenses involved, which means that you might be able to go after some of the smaller foundation grants that may not be as feasible for the folks in the sciences.
I'll also say on the sponsor side of that, I found that generally working with like National Endowment, NEH is a good one. If I've had questions about, application requirements, eligibility, awards, etc. those sponsors, you know, NEH and some of the foundations have been very responsive sometimes, you know, because, you know, perhaps they have a smaller applicant pool, I'm not sure. But they're very, very responsive, I find, more so than some of the larger science agencies or STEM.
Thank you for that. And I think it's connected to Heather's answer. We have a question from Mariah Crawford, who mentioned, I think she refers to one of the NEH fellowships that Josh mentioned earlier, about one of the NEH fellowships. Mariah says they give you $5,000 a month, as you mentioned, and they don't allow you to work outside of the project during your time in the fellowship. How does that work financially? Does anyone have an answer?
I guess that's probably a conversation you probably have to have with your chair to figure out how that would work with your other responsibilities in your role. But I'm curious if others have insight into that.
My dogs are in the background. I agree with Josh, you know, in terms of financially, you would want to talk to your chair about that. And perhaps, you know, if it's $5,000 a month, what type of, you know, course, it sounds like you would just be working on that project, making sure that the department has coverage in order for you to do that would be really important. Try to say it really quick.
Who wants to go for a walk?
Yeah.
What other questions do people have? Let's see. I have one about becoming an NEH reviewer. I've applied. I've had one of the NEH summer grants, and both Josh and Heather have been very gracious with me over the last year, helping me put together a big NEH application, which has recently been declined, but it was a great experience working, and we'll go back to it. But I did not know that that was an option. I always assumed that the NEH would invite reviewers. So
Yeah,
I was that's fairly common for federal agencies. And I was in a webinar with an NEH program officer, and he said, yeah, they're looking for reviewers. And so you can I think the way to initiate that would be to find a program officer that is sort of in an area similar to yours and ask about being a reviewer. Mm-hmm. They probably have instructions online about how to do that as well.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. Thank you. There's an answer here in the chat from Patricia Cummings. Thank you so much. She says, usually VCU complements your salary. This is an answer to Mariah's question. Complements your salary if you have a fellowship for something less than your salary. So if it doesn't add up to what you usually make, and the Fulbright grants are a great example of how that works.
Okay.
I hope at some point we can have Jeff Wing join us to talk a little bit about Fulbright and Fulbright applications. The deadline for those grants are September 14th, which is right around the corner. Any other questions or comments from the audience? Okay, going once, going twice. Thank you all for attending this event. I know I've noticed a few graduate students. Some of my graduate students are in the audience. For graduate students, this can be a little bit overwhelming if you haven't applied for a grant yet. So I would just say, talk to your advisor first, talk to your professors first. If you'd like to get some grant writing experience, see if you can join a team in your field or in other fields and see what that's like. And I also like that both Josh and Heather referred to the examples of the samples of the applications the NEH provides on their website. Read a sample, see what that's like, and then build a team or talk to one of your advisors about getting some experience. Let's see, let's check one more time. I see there is one question. No, I think we answered that.
And Christina, our office, for anyone, but for graduate students specifically, we understand that can be very overwhelming, those application processes. Our office is happy to meet with anyone individually, to go over, this is how it's going to go, just to kind of walk you through that whole process. We're happy to do that.
Yeah, and feel free to reach out to us in research development as well. We're happy to consult and help you find opportunities and refine your proposals.
Sorry, I muted myself. And Josh, your office has a grant writing academy, and I understand that some humanities faculty or graduate students
Yeah.
will join.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. We have something called Grant Academy, and it's for early career faculty. We're looking for faculty who have identified a grant and a project that they feel would sort of take their careers to the next level if it were awarded. And we go through the process of working with you individually and through group workshops to help you prepare that proposal.
Okay, I'm trying to find the link. I'll post it. I'll drop it. Oh.
Yeah, and the applications for Grant Academy are due at the end of September, on September 30th.
Okay, wonderful. I dropped the link in the chat if anyone else is interested. I think we are right at the end, and in the interest of time, and we have a dog to walk, so waiting for us. I hope this was helpful for you. We at the HRC, we also provide assistance. We also help people write amazing grants. Our team and Heather's team has helped us through the process, is getting ready to submit a small NEH grant, one of the connections grant. If you're looking for a partner, if you have an idea, if you're looking for a partner in the college or across the university, reach out to me. I can reach out to Josh and Heather, and we'll find you a team if that's what you're looking for. I don't think we have done a lot of grant writing in the humanities. I don't know. I'm trying to understand why that tradition doesn't exist, but if there is something that the center can do to foster that and to support you, please let us know. So many thanks for attending this event, and thank you again to Josh and Heather for their time, and to Tyler for helping us put this together and for working his magic behind the screen. And also thank you for sharing your slides. Be on the lookout for them in your email. We hope to also post a recording of this event on our HRC website. So if you'd like to support and learn more about the HRC, please join our mailing list. I used to have an assistant, but I don't have one anymore. So I'm trying to post the links while I also talk. If you'd also like to join to learn more about the HRC or to read our newsletters, here's a link to the most recent newsletter. Good luck with your grant applications. Keep in touch, and we look forward to seeing you at our future Research Fridays. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.